But how I got involved open source was, um, I mean, I was kind of working on websites I was building websites in like middle school and high school for
Okay.
fun. And I think it was well into my second job. I mean, 5 years of just like never touching open source, never really thinking about it. And I used it. I just like never really, just didn't really occur to me that like, oh, like people actually volunteer their time to
Yeah,
build the tools. And here I am, like probably like for 5 years, I'd complain like, "Oh, how come this doesn't work? How come this project that exists for free based on volunteer work, how come it didn't anticipate my needs?"
yeah, yeah, totally.
And I was working on some I was feeling comfortable in CSS. I kind of I was at a point in my career where I was like front end had become a term because I started before the term front end existed. I was just kind of doing like quote unquote full stack, which full stack was just opening up Dreamweaver and then just saving on the
Yeah,
FTP server and then using file lock so someone else didn't save on it. So like no version control, complete chaos of just like
yeah,
editing, yeah, just doing it live, saving on the server, PHP, WordPress nonsense chaos. Um, but um, I was, I hit a point where I was kind of feeling, React was taking off, Webpack was taking off, and I kind of felt like, oh, I'm kind of being left behind. There's this like
mm,
JavaScript revolution happening, and I feel like all my knowledge is like styling and kind of like old school jQuery and stuff. Like, oh man, I'm gonna get left in the dust if I don't learn about what this React thing is.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but in kind of in seeing all this stuff come out, I'm like, oh man, I got to catch up. But then when I actually like put the time, I mean, this was like a year of me just like following people, revisiting my knowledge, challenging my own assumptions. And then by the time I caught up, I kind of started to see like, oh, there's gaps in this, like you kind of hear
yeah,
the marketing hype, and then it takes a long time, it takes a lot of learning, but then um like when I was like actually using Webpack, I'm like, oh man, like they don't have like good like image like loaders or like at the time like you can just do the bare minimum, but it's like I actually wanted to optimize my images,
okay.
based on like a Webpack loader. Like I wanted to be able to resize with like a query. And so that was my first open source contribution was like I started like putting together a Webpack loader to like optimize the image the way that I was doing it manually. But it was just taking me a ton of time. I was just working on like a lot of like content heavy sites, not so much
Yeah, yeah.
like, not some like dashboards and apps. It was like a lot of like blog posty stuff. And so I wrote a
But
Webpack
images,
loader and like,
obviously.
yeah. And like no one used it, and that's fine, but that was like my first kind of like, foray into open source is just like finding a gap and then just kind of like just throwing it out